Good day, and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Battle video. So in this video, we are going to take on the Super Class Only Extreme Super Battle Road. And the team that we are using is the Universal Survival Saga team, with the LR Jiren as a friend lead, and we're using our own Jiren as our lead. So basically the strategy for this is really just going to be linking up the two Jirens. Hoping that Strength Jiren can get a stun, which will really help. Getting the Tech Jiren to do a lot of damage, and hopefully triggering his active skill, and then essentially just surviving on rotation with the other units. The other units that make up this team are the LR Go Freezer, who I definitely think you could replace. I would probably put MVP 17 in their place. MVP 17, even the Spirit Bomb Goku, any card actually. This 55% dupe, especially without their easy A, just did alright in the third slot. Obviously did some decent damage, but defensively was not so grand at all. But yeah, so we've got the Elago Freezer. We have the Physical Kale SS2, who has defense, damage reduction, and a high chance to launch 2 attacks. Then we have the Fit Boo or Super Boo. We have the Easy Aid Topo, and then we also have the Rubrian, the Int Rubrian, who is a full power support, along with also being a reduction tool for the opposition's attack and defense. So basically, the Boo, he has 180% attack and defense. He's got a high chance to evade enemy attacks, and he also has a chance to stun. So Boo, we're going to link up. He's going to be our first slot tank, alongside the Kale, Physical Kale with her 60% damage reduction, her 180% attack, and her ability to shoot multiple super attacks will be sitting in the second slot. They will be a very solid defensive rotation. Then we'll have the Topo, who will float around, providing support to both rotations, alongside the rest of the team. Topo obviously is a 1 key 40% attack and defense support, who also has defense reduction when our health gets below the 70% threshold. He does boost attack damage if he supers first for allies. However, we are mainly going to run him in the third slot. We will very rarely push him into the first slot since our other rotations are so set defensively. Then, yeah, basically, like I said, the strategy is realistically to get Strength Jiren to get his stun. So, for those of you who don't know, Strength Jiren is 120% attack and 130% attack and defense, and also has a chance to stun all enemies once he enters the battlefield. This can occur every single turn, so it can occur multiple times in battle, and it's very helpful because obviously if he stuns them, the Tech Jiren can get a critical hit. Tech Jiren himself is very simply 180% attack and defense. He will have attacks effective against all types when enemies have reduced attack and defense, and he will also auto crit when the opposition is stunned. The main thing we're going to want to try and do with Jiren is to produce his active skill, which is a automatic stun and reduces attack and defense by 40%. So that's really the strategy. The Fit Boo will keep himself safe for the most part. We don't have too much fear about Fit Boo. And then we have the Physical Kale, who also is very solid defensively. So in this situation, as we've set up, we took out the Int unit first, just to prevent any sneaky supers onto our units. And then we are going to try and remove Freezer, and then afterwards I call him Captain Ginyu because that's eventually who took him over, but not Captain Ginyu. Freezer's new force, I don't really know all of their names. They were not so important to me. And we go, and they're not going to be too important to Kale either, who's going to get a nice crit. Kale's done some really impressive damage. I would definitely take Kale. Not only is she super solid as a second slot unit, but she actually does a very good amount of damage. And because you can build her full crits, she's actually a very reliable source of damage for you to run on your team. And what I've noticed with all these extreme super battle roads is that you want to have a reliable source of damage, because in a lot of these you don't want the fight to drag on too long unless your entire team is made out of super ultra damage resistant units. Most of these fights you have multiple enemies. Most times they're attacking every single slot. Most of the time in the final fights, even when it's one boss, they all hit super hard. So the main strategy I found that really works well is to actually just have quite a substantial amount of offense. Very similarly to the mono SBR, you don't want your team to take things too slow. Even high control teams that have a lot of stunning, sealing, attack lowering, defense lowering can tend to struggle a little bit. So yeah, because this is the super SBR, you can essentially build whatever superclass team you want and whatever superclass team you think is really, really good. I do suggest taking a team that has some modicum of control, because it can be quite difficult to do some of these fights. You fight 4 people in the first fight, you fight 5 people in the second fight, and then you will also fight, I think in this stage you fight 3 in the final fight. So there's a lot of enemies in the superclass SBR. So I definitely suggest bringing some control, just to help maintain the enemy's damage to you and just to kind of keep everything in check. The Super Boo's really good. I definitely would suggest awakening him if you haven't awakened him. His damage is okay. It's not the greatest. So if you want to bring him in but not use cars on him, I think you could do that. You would just obviously need to compensate by having other units that either replace that 1 million or so damage in your team. Definitely. Just remember, obviously, if you are going to not Kai a unit, essentially their stats will be lower because you're not going to get the bottom right path. So I only ever suggested if either A, you can do all 3 other paths, or B, the unit serves like a very singular purpose, like Demon King Piccolo, for example, in the Res Warriors Extreme SBR. Technically it's just a brick wall. He's not really a damage dealer or anything, so you're welcome to obviously do that with him. Unfortunately, we did not get the AoE stun from Jiren, which means that we're going to have to try and work our way through the opposition here. We can obviously decide who we want to attack. We're going to just remove the Frost. We're just going to eliminate him. And then we're also going to follow up with Goku on the physical unit. So Go Frieza, obviously how they work is they trigger an impressive damage boost whenever the enemy is attack lowered and defense lowered. But yeah, they are a little bit at 55% in the third slot. Not exactly the greatest unit. They do very well, don't get me wrong, but they could definitely do better. If I had a dupe or like built around them a bit more, they definitely would perform a bit better. But I went for Jiren because he's a little bit more defensively sound. I haven't been a fan of cards that only trigger their defense on super attacking. It can be a little bit underwhelming. Especially when in this ESBR mode, units can take like 90k damage before they've even fired off an attack, just from a normal. So yeah, definitely something that I've wanted to be aware of, at least while I've been performing these stages. Obviously Topper is a great help, buffing out the entire team and fitting in on the category. He also links really well with Jiren and with both Jiren LR and Jiren squared. But he does link very well with them. If you are lacking a Jiren, like if you don't have strength Jiren, but you have Goku's lead, you could always link Toppo with the tech Jiren. It will provide a very similar effect, and if Toppo is under 70% health, if you are under 70% health, you will actually tank better than the Strength Jiren. So there's nothing lost by having Toppo pair up with the Jiren. If you have more Universe 11 cards, let's say you have the Int Toppo as well, you definitely could use him. He would be a more than acceptable card to run in this stage, so yeah. But because it's so diverse, the super class, Extreme Super Battle Road, you really can just run any team that you wish. I definitely would just suggest one that maybe has at least 2 stunners and a sealer. Otherwise, maybe bring one that has AoE. I have found on the super side, at least, AoE is a tad missing. Only really Krillin has it, but the full power lead for the super class, the SS4 Goku, is a bit of a mixed bag. He's still very good, especially if you have dupes in him, but he can really fall off a lot if your health is low, which can be a problem in Extreme Super Battle Road. So the Ribrianne obviously isn't giving her full buff here. Unfortunately, she's really only giving her full debuff to the opposition for herself, essentially. Physical Kale does not count towards Pepe Gals, which is a bit, tragic. And obviously Ribrianne is giving herself full the buff, but the way to increase Ribrianne's buff would be to maybe bring any of the Pepe Gals, Kefla. I wouldn't bring Caulifla or take Caulifla because she needs you to have a full Pepe Gals Pure Sands team. Similarly with Strength Kale, I definitely wouldn't bring Strength Kale because you need Caulifla. But yeah, overall, pretty decent. Pretty solid run. Here, we haven't had too many problems so far. This final fight is actually surprisingly difficult. The Zamasu and the Goku Rose are both a real challenge. I definitely suggest focusing on the Zamasu. He has quite extensive type advantage against me, at least. But I would definitely suggest overall just focusing on whichever one has type advantage. And then from there working on it accordingly. So hopefully we're going to be able to control up the fight here by getting some stuns with Boo. That's going to really help us. And then obviously we can keep some attack lowering up with the Go Freezer, because they do lower attack on their 12 and 18 key. But that's really all the control we have. Luckily Kale does great damage, and she's going to be a good source of damage against the Zamasu. And then obviously when we lower the attack and defense of the units, we will also get the activation of Jiren's effective against all types, which will really help us in just kind of like increasing our damage output, because then Jiren will be able to attack the Zamasu and we'll be able to deal some damage accordingly. So we were unfortunate again to not get the stun with Strength Jiren. But at this point we're looking pretty buff. Just busy examining his passive there, keeping everything under control. But yeah, we should be more than fine. We're also going to get some ki from when we get hit here. So once we fire off the super attack, we should be dealing some really solid damage. They are reduced in terms of attack and defense. So Jiren will be effective against all types, which will be quite helpful, which makes that about a 6.5 million attack stat, which is very good. And then you can see we dish out some really good damage. We also get lucky in that Jiren gets a additional, which is obviously great. Jiren's additional is obviously fantastic if the unit is attack down and defense down. But if the unit is not reduced, then obviously crits would be a little bit better overall. But so far, the run has been really good. We are focusing on the Zamasu here, so we should have maybe had the Toppo focus on Zamasu, thus allowing us to focus on one target more than the other. But for now, this will suffice in terms of performance. We've obviously managed to do quite a decent chunk of damage. And then what we'll do is we will be able to pop a item here. We'll probably pop the Icarus, and we'll pop the Android 8 just for the defense buff more so than the heal, and then we should be fine. So obviously we're gonna have physical Kale, hopefully finish off the Zamasu, and then we will be able to kind of enter into the next turn, being able to focus down on the Goku Black, who's going to be our last remaining enemy. So obviously very clutch dodge there by Boo, very important. I have found during these ESBR that dodges and stuns have actually been more effective overall than sealing and damage reduction for me. That's just because the dodges have been basically reducing damage to 0, and the same with stuns. They basically completely remove the threat. Now obviously they're a bit more chance than things like damage reduction and sealing, but for me, the fact that you can reduce damage completely, or basically like fully mitigate the damage, is incredibly helpful overall. And it's really helped me push through some of these ESBR, because I find when you take damage still, it actually can be a bit of a problem for you, because you might take too much chip damage. Some of these bosses, and if you don't use an item, can hit your units for 40-50k each time, and taking 3 or 4 of those puts you in a bad spot. So I have found that stunning and evading a lot of these attacks has really helped in terms of reducing the chip damage, and thus giving me a bit more health to gamble with later on in the stage, which is obviously very helpful. But right now, we are going to take out Zamasu, which is really going to help us in focusing down on the Rose, the Goku Rose, which is good. It's a good play in these two character or two enemy fights. It's actually best to focus on a single unit rather than what I've done here, where I've kind of split everything up. And the reason being is because if you focus on each unit at a time, you can obviously kind of stack your debuffs / stunning / sealing / this. But sometimes in the attempts to mitigate or kind of maximize damage, I end up focusing on both targets. It's going to be a kind of read it as you see it kind of thing, rather than this works every time, this doesn't work every time. Sometimes it will work if you focus on both at once, sometimes it won't. It's just going to depend on how the match goes, who they super, how many dodges you get, etc, etc. And we took a lot of damage there, as you can see. So yeah, things get a little bit dicey, and I was actually a bit concerned here because, like I said, Kale is great and does good damage, but she is fighting a strength Goku or a strength Goku Rose, so was just a tiny bit scared that she wouldn't be able to do enough damage. But yeah, overall very good, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, cheers and bye.